right now. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to anyone who is here. Welcome to the second webinar of our series on sustainable health equity and metrics. My name is Andres Sales. I'm the head of strategic communication in SHEM, and I'm very glad to receive you here for our second webinar. I'm showing you the webpage of SHEM because I want to call your attention to the fact that we are going to be promoting all the webinars here, and you can always come back here to take a look on the recordings and on the text. We are very glad in hosting this webinar series. We believe that this is a very urgent topic from our times, and we are glad to have our speakers to engage it with this perspective. That's the one that we have been arguing for, of the need to put together the two most challenging the biggest challenge of our times, the one from the sustainability and the one of health equity. That's what anchors SHEM's work. Today, we are going to be having our team as criteria for sustainable models as basis for equitable well-being. And we're going to have two speakers, right? We're going to have two speakers and Mari that's going to be commenting. We're going to have Dr. Math is not here, right? Dr. Eduard Müller. We're going to have Dr. Juan Garay, who was the host of the series. And we're going to have Dr. Mary Stewart. Mary Stewart is Planetary Health Alliance. Dr. Juan Garay is from SHEM. And Dr. Eduard is from University for International Development of Costa Rica. I always get it wrong.
Cooperation,
sorry. Thank you for that. Juan, I will give you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. Can everyone hear well?
Yes.
Is it okay? Fine. Thanks so much to all of you for joining. I am speaking from the north of Spain in an eco village. So I'm trying to put actions to the words and the ideas I try to stand for. The aim of this series of webinars, as Andre was saying, is to try to introduce and discuss a methodology of measuring metrics of sustainable well-being models, sustainable and equitable well-being models. Arachu in the call, she also co-manages this working group, which we hope will gradually expand. And we had the first webinar last month looking at the ethical threshold of CO2 or carbon emissions and what does it mean today to the world. I will, with the first slides, recap on the main data that we have updated from the recent release of the UN Population Division demographic estimates for the rest of the century and for the last 5 years. But of course, sustainability is not only about carbon emissions, so we will introduce a few concepts on planetary boundaries. Eduard is highly knowledgeable on that, and will take the floor then. We will then look at how those planetary boundaries, the trespassing of those boundaries, can be measured by the ecological footprint. Mathis Wackernagel, who was in the 90s, through his first thesis, one of the founders of this ecological footprint methodology. Apologies for not being able to join because he's in the Pacific coast and it's 5 a.m. at that time, but we discussed the slides, and we're going to show a video that he's shared with us on that. Then we will briefly analyze which countries have not only carbon emissions, as we saw last month, but also ecological footprint, which are sustainable to the global nature's resources, and we'll discuss on that. And then I think Maria at that time will tell us or will comment, unless she wants to do it at home, but we need to really be quite swift because both Eduard and Marie need to leave in 50 minutes. We'll discuss on the links between planetary health and human health that her wide network follows. And Eduard, I'm really looking forward to that, will probably challenge us with whether metrics are useful or not, and how we may not have much time to measure, and we need to act against what we've been doing, which is pressing on nature, and it's time to restore nature with somehow negative footprints. So there we go. If you can put the first slide, Andre.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so this is our webinar today. Next one. So we will look at criteria of ecologically sustainable models from the country international data we have. Next one, with the follow with this is a first slide to we are putting forward some analysis for discussion. It will help us fine-tune our analysis during these 12 planned seminars on each of the dimensions of sustainable well-being models. So we had a first webinar on as I said, on CO2 emissions, and we estimated an ethical threshold that is per capita, that is the emissions that the limit of emissions that would prevent us from hitting the 1.5 degree from many scientists' point of no return. But we know there are other planetary boundaries than the carbon upset that we mean to nature. And so we will talk, Eduard will discuss the planetary boundaries. We'll introduce some main concepts. We will then just present what the Global Footprint Network and Mathis was going to do, which is the methodology of the ecological footprint. At that time, Mari will tell us something about the relations between the planet and human health dynamics. And I will present the analysis of the countries which have carbon emissions, ecological footprint, and biocapacity per capita. I'll elaborate on that in sustainable and replicable levels. And at the end, Eduard will tell us about how to go beyond limiting our footprint, but go the other way with negative footprints or regenerative development. He's particularly a leader on regenerative agriculture. In fact, I'm trying to apply his ideas here in my field. Next one. Okay, you cannot see it very well. I'm so sorry, but too many graphs for one slide. But what I meant to show you here, this is analysis I've been doing in the last couple of weeks. We have a carbon budget, which is meant to mean that we have so many emissions to go before we hit the particles per million at the threshold level that will lead us in the dark blue to the 1.5 degree increase, and in the light blue at the 2 degree increase. In terms of how at the present trend we are progressing to those limits, at the present trend, in 2030, we will have exhausted the carbon budget for 1.5, and at the most at 2050 for 2 degrees. And what we would need to limit that is, it can be seen in many different ways. But what I've been doing is, at every year, what is the level that would allow us, at least for the rest of the century, to avoid hitting those dangerous and really dramatic thresholds. And at the present time, at the present time, that is in the lower right graph. The carbon emissions at the world average level are in red, and the ethical threshold is in blue. At this point in time is 1.3 metric tons of CO2 per year, but only to avoid the 2 degree increase, but only 0.3 metric tons per year to avoid the 1.5. Can you imagine if we ask the world to have emissions at a level 15 to 20 times lower than what they have now? That is a revolution, and of course, no country is meeting the required rhythm. So the discussion with Eduard will be very interesting. Next one. Okay, it's not only CO2. We also know that NTO and methane are also contributing probably to 10-15% of what CO2 in total is doing to global warming, but and the exponential increase is similar. This is just a reminder that we're not just talking of carbon emissions. Next one. And this is how beyond carbon emissions we are transgressing safe boundaries, planetary boundaries. So Eduard, yours is the floor to tell us something about that.
Okay, you need to stop sharing so I can share.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I start with sustainability. I don't believe in sustainability anymore. I think for the last 20 years, we've been unsustainable and there's no way back unless we regenerate conditions for life on the planet. We're way beyond achieving sustainability. And as I said while we were in the initial conversation, none of the changes we're seeing at the planet, floods, droughts, fires, sea level rise, have been caused by future emissions. So focusing on reduction of future impact is already late. We need to really change the things. And 37 years have passed since the definition of sustainability. And I give all the reason for the kids to be mad with us. We have mortgaged their future completely. And we have crossed all the tipping points. We're not going to cross the tipping points in 2050. Just the top left, increase in sea level, in sea temperature, global ocean temperature, the last 2 years is exponential. We've crossed the methane tipping point too, and Arctic with 10 degrees centigrade. So we're not in climate change. We're in a collapse of our civilization. Our democratic systems are failing. I don't think there's a single country that has a good governance system with really represents the majority. We are with exponential change, and AI is going to bring even more exponential change and disruption to a system that is already breaking apart. So we really need to tighten our seatbelts and start acting. I don't even know. I run a university, which I founded 30 years ago. I'm not even sure what we really need to be preparing. And we're way ahead of other universities since we started working fully on regeneration already a decade ago. So what are we preparing in terms of people to deal with the current challenges and the future challenges? And there's a tremendous bias, especially from the north, on technology. And will technology solve it? Are electric cars really, the solution to climate change? The decarbonization strategy for Costa Rica is based on electric mobility. It's absurd. There's no sense in thinking you can actually recover the damage at the planetary level. And this comes from the misconception of a reductionist science and a reductionist approach that has driven us into this hole. We have 3 conventions. We should have had 1 convention. There's no way we can separate climate from biodiversity loss. And desertification is a consequence of both of them together. So we really need to shift. And 24 years ago, the Earth Charter told us that humanity had to choose a future. And we still haven't done it. We're still there, lingering with more diagnostics, more analysis, more discussions. And so my invitation is, let's go create a future of abundance and well-being. And we're still on time. The thing is, how do we do it? Where do we start? And here's where we have some guiding principles. This is the last version of the Planetary Boundaries. It was published 2.5 days ago. And if we look, that's a new graph, which complements the circle. We are now with 7 of the planetary boundaries going into the risk and high risk zone. What does this mean? The green circle in the center means the safe operating space for humanity. That's how the Center for Resilience, the Stockholm Center for Resilience, named it. It would be sustainability, we call it that, where the planet could actually keep on providing conditions for us humans to stay alive and all other life forms. Already since the first publication in 2009, the biodiversity loss was the most critical one. And a very low-hanging fruit, which could be reverted completely, is the use of chemicals, especially fertilizers. And I'll mention that in the second part of my intervention. We don't need fertilizers to produce food. That is BS, a mixture of corruption between the corporate petrochemical industry, the academia, and governments. So, interestingly enough, we are focusing mostly on CO2. Everybody's talking about carbon. The conversation today in your first webinar started about carbon. Well, carbon is least worry compared to the other ones. And why do we still keep on focusing on carbon? We're not in the completely purple zone with carbon. And we won't be able to change this around just by focusing on reducing emissions. And that's where the planet is going wrong. And that's why the UN system is going wrong. That's where the governments are going wrong. So much money put in to reverting emissions. And the legacy carbon that's already in the atmosphere is going to cause even more damage as we go, but it's already causing irreversible planetary collapse. So just to give you a very short overlook on biodiversity, which is now neglected to a second position. We have lost in my region, Latin America, 94% of the abundance. That means we have 6% of the biodiversity left for ecosystems to keep on providing services for life, including our life. What does abundance mean? I just ask you the question, when was the last time you scraped the windshield after going to a field trip to get all the bugs that were stuck on the windshield when I was a kid? That's abundance. And that's what's missing. It's not species. We're worried about 1 million species going extinct. No, it's not a question of species. It's a question of the amount of biodiversity that is required for ecosystems to keep on functioning. And we're now seeing the mix of climate change and biodiversity loss, how it's a feedback loop in all directions, which will end up with a feedback loop on humans. So the changes we're seeing now, for example, in the Amazon, that is a tipping point. 10 degrees centigrade increase in temperature in December last year in the Arctic is a tipping point. The release of methane, which is heating up the planet 86 times faster from the polar regions, not from cattle, is a tipping point. And we're getting very close, or we already passed some of these tipping points. And I think an image tells everything. This is the Amazon right now. The biggest river on the planet is dry. People have to cross it by walk, by foot, not by boat. So I always say this is the best scientifically documented planetary extinction. Do we still need more diagnostics? Problem is, generating all this data goes into information, knowledge. We forgot to turn it into wisdom. And we're far behind in turning that wisdom into action. And this is where we need to shift our gears. So I always ask the question, what is development? This is the beach that's very close. I'm living on the coast. This is a developed country where my kids and my grandkids can see nature still intact without the human footprint that damages most of the planet today. So keeping this in a pristine way for the future generations, for me, that is development. Others consider this development, and I don't go into those places. You don't know if you're in Bali, or if you're in Dominican Republic, or now Costa Rica, or Cancun, or Fiji. It's just a disaster in terms of culture, in terms of local development. The drip over to the lower level populations is actually not happening. So we need to really question that. And that's where Kate had the brilliant idea in her Donut Economics to bring the planetary boundaries with a social threshold in the inside. So with one infograph, we can actually understand what a country is doing and where it's at and where we need to act in terms of reverting the planetary damage, and at the same time, bringing the social foundation to being at a developed level, so where people are equally benefiting from what we call development. So this is from Kate, her slide. We can see Norway has a perfect social foundation, democracy, education, but Norway is a parasite because it has achieved that well-being of its society by using resources from the rest of the planet in an exponential way. So the second ring the outer ring is the ecological ceiling. If a country is within that ceiling, it's okay. And this is where all the other measurements of ecological footprint and so on have to be moved to a more holistic approach. I don't know what has happened with the ecological footprint from Mathis. At one time, I did it for myself, and with the impact on my car, I had half a kilo carbon, whereas by eating beef, I had 2.5 kilos. So we need to get rid of the cattle. And in my second part, I'll just talk about that. So here we see Bangladesh completely under the limits of the planetary ceiling, but completely empty in terms of social well-being. So I'll stop there, and my second part will be then on regeneration. So this is just a shake up a little bit of all the data that UN is processing, that all the agencies are processing, and they're on the wrong track. I mean, we cannot concentrate on reducing emissions and using electric cars to solve our problems. We are already seeing a planetary collapse based on the carbon that's already up there.
I wonder if I would go on now with the ecological footprint and then give the word to Mari to make the links. So if you allow me, Andrea, and you put the next slides and you jump on the slides that Eduard already elaborated on the planetary boundaries. So that's the next one.
Which one you wanna?
Next one. So just go to the ecological footprint, just for a short. Okay, and I'll just say a couple of words and before we see the video of Mathis. The thing is, I mean, we are friends, Eduard, and I don't like telling anyone who is that he or she is wrong. I think we all try. And the thing, but we get your point. It's beyond measuring what we need to do, and we need to act. I remember when I meet many youngsters in universities or even here now in the Eco Village, they say they are fed up of doomsday talk. They cannot put up more with this is the end. So what? What do we do? So by measuring, we can also influence dramatic change, because it's not just measuring where are the sustainable countries, which already challenges the development models and the Human Development Index, for instance. And it's not just measuring how those models allow us to see which social, like the donut analysis, social dimensions are compatible with sustainable development models. But it also tells us how trespassing those boundaries is taking the life of others, of now and coming generations. And we make, for your information, Eduard, we make the link with how the capitalist system is allowing excess accumulation, and that excess accumulation is in fact driving heated production, consumption, trade, and other consequences with the ecology and nature, and that has a price in human life. So we are really challenging the status quo, and we hope that these metrics will at least help, push on the brakes while we go backwards, like you're trying to say with the regenerative development. But we will come to that discussion. So the ecological footprint, as we were saying, tries to measure beyond carbon emissions how we are using our natural resources. And I'll just say two things before the video. One of the concepts is biocapacity per capita. And this is very interesting because no one talks about it. Even I've had during the last month a number of discussions with Mathis, and he was not in full agreement of something I'm going to say, which is biocapacity is the way the world, by our country boundaries, is distributing natural resources, and is one of the primary sources of injustice. No one questions why some countries live on 10 hectares per person and others live on 0.1, like Gaza now, but not only Gaza under genocide, but so many other countries. So this is interesting because if you look at, if you take as a development model countries that have very large biocapacity per capita, they're blessed or they are privileged or whatever, they cannot be replicable for the rest of the world. So this is the first criteria we use from the ecological footprint in limiting to countries that, let's say, do not hoard or do not have natural resources in excess of what could be replicable for all. The second thing is how we're using that biocapacity and through the ecological footprint measurements of how we're using it, how we're using our land through crops or grazelands or residential areas, industrial areas, forests, etc. And what is interesting here is two things. One is even the ecological footprint. If you keep the ecological footprint beyond your national biocapacity, that's not enough because you may be talking about a privileged country. But if you keep it below the world average biocapacity, we may not be doing enough. And of course, we're not respecting the 2022 December Montreal Agreement on leaving 30% of the planet out of human interaction. So we need to think of ecological footprints which are below 70% of the biocapacity, global biocapacity per capita. And that leaves only 10 countries and very low income and very low life expectancy countries. So it is already a challenge. But I'll let you listen to the video, and then I'll just show a few graphs, and I'll give the word to Mary.
Were you hearing the sound?
No.
Okay. Sorry. Here it goes.
Nearly every nation has committed to reducing its carbon footprint. But this is no simple undertaking. For example, let's say part of your country's plan is to restore forest land to sequester carbon. This should lead to a reduction in net carbon emissions. However, this may also reduce cropland, and therefore your country's ability to produce its own food. Global Footprint Network measures more than just a country's carbon footprint. Our national footprint accounts can provide a comprehensive way to better understand the links between competing demands on our planet. Our accounts help national governments understand and manage their natural resources to help them make confident policy decisions and create a prosperous, resilient future for their residents. They provide an ecological balance sheet for each country. The footprint accounts measure a country's annual demand for the goods and services that its land and seas can provide. We then compare that to the resources available, which we call biocapacity. This information can be used to identify which countries are using more ecological resources and services than they have, who we call ecological debtors, and those with more resources than they're using. We call them ecological creditors. Government leaders from the United Arab Emirates, the Philippines, and Montenegro are using our data to develop and evaluate sustainability policy. And thousands of scientists and students from around the world have downloaded our data to research everything from socioeconomic indicators to land use patterns. Our footprint accounts are based on nearly 200,000 data points per country per year. Data has been compiled since 1961, allowing users to track trends over time. Most nations have seen their ecological footprints go up, so that today, the human population worldwide is using 1.6 times more natural resources and services than our planet can regenerate in a year. Carbon is the largest contributor to our ecological footprint globally. We believe that you can't manage what you can't measure. It's time to get our ecological balance sheets back in check. Download our free public data package to learn more about the national footprint accounts today.
Okay.
I would suggest, if it's okay with you, Mary, that I will explain very briefly the last update of the ecological footprint and biocapacity.
Yes, please do. Please do.
And then you and Eduard can go on with the discussion and the challenge of the metrics and the way forward. Now, as I said, we're looking at biocapacity and ecological footprint. What is interesting also about the ecological footprint is the one that relates to production and the one that relates to consumption. For instance, in Europe, we have a 40% higher consumption ecological footprint because we really rely on an 80% of our consumption is related to global trade. And so we may be using our ecological footprint, at our national level within some boundaries, but what is called how is it called, the carbon adjustment and the border adjustments mean that most of the things we consume, they may be produced elsewhere, but we are part of the ecological footprint, it means. So in the end, the way we measure the ecological footprint with its limitations tells us how we are using, and the most important element in the ecological footprint, making countries unsustainable and using, as Matthew was saying, 1.7 planets or more, is again carbon emissions. Although I agree with Eduard, we've trespassed so many others that do not get the same publicity for whichever reason. The last thing I wanted to say, but if you can, Andre, put the slides back, I'll just show the analysis of the carbon emissions, the biocapacity, and the ecological footprint, which countries are respecting those thresholds. And just okay, so this is the world's average biocapacity, and the way the ecological footprint is increasing. As we increase our ecological footprint, we decrease the threshold, so they go far apart. And in the last 6 years, the ecological footprint has risen exponentially. Next one. Okay, these are the ecologically sustainable countries according to these 3 criteria, which is those countries that have carbon emissions that at that level, if replicable for the rest of the world, we would not hit the global warming, the point of no return within this century. Second, they have biocapacity below the world average. They're not talking or showing off with their development models out of privilege. And third, they have a footprint that is below not the national biocapacity, because that is a privileged or a marginalized condition, but below the world average. So the number of countries that have these conditions are in the range of 40 countries, but those that have met constantly those 3 criteria are only 20 countries in the world, and they keep decreasing every 5 years. I do this analysis every 5 years. I turn it into dynamic mapping, and we select those countries to see which of them have levels of well-being, which can be a model for the rest, and also economic dynamics that can be replicable worldwide. So we will do that in the next webinars. But this is the situation right now. I think the next one will give the lead to Mary to discuss. Next one. Okay, so that's it.
The last one.
Yeah, so fine. Mary, your turn, please.
There. Thank you so much, and thanks for this opportunity to have a quick weigh in. I guess I just want to, maybe for people who don't know what planetary health is, it's really about looking at the health and well-being of humanity as it is situated within and impacted by planetary scale environmental changes, and then what we can do to reverse this trend in order to create a livable future for all. And I just want to say that because what Eduard said earlier was really true. It's like climate change doesn't happen in isolation, right? Or these other enormous global scale changes to our biophysical environment don't happen in isolation. And so the idea of just focusing, for example, on reducing CO2 levels means that, in a sense, if we get the diagnosis wrong, we get the treatment wrong. And what that means is, if we really just look at decarbonizing our environment and how we live, we might really focus on these technological changes such as energy systems or so on. But that means we're going to miss all the other changes that are happening, right? So global pollution, might not be reduced at the same time, or we still are converting too much land. We're not saving our biodiversity. So we really need to look at our problems in this holistic way. So I just wanted to start with that. The other is I want to go back and really say that we're talking about health equity, and I really want to make sure that we all understand that the right to health equity and the right to healthy, stable natural environments are fully interconnected, and they're absolutely, both are absolutely required in order to achieve the SDGs. And especially, I love the preference of creating a regenerative and thriving future, right? Like, because we don't want to talk about sustainability for all the reasons that Edward mentioned earlier. So how do we move to that thriving and regenerative future? I think the other piece that I just want to bring up is also not relying only on technological challenges. I think that there have been identified through some work in planetary health 3 challenges, one of which is conceptual and empathy failures, right? So failures of the imagination, failure of caring for each other, broken relationships with the environment, broken relationships with each other. Another is knowledge failures. So, in terms of research and information that we provide each other, the transdisciplinary work that needs to happen, but also being transparent about the work that comes out. And then implementation failures. And that's really where I see more around governance challenges. So again, not just technological challenges, but really sort of power problems, right? So how do we govern ourselves? And how do we bring the rights of nature, the rights of humans into our laws and governance? How do we all set up commissioners for future generations, or ministries of future generations, whatever you might want to call it, but that those kinds of governance systems that really are taking into account how we work today and how we operate today, how do those impact 7 generations forward? So those are just a few of my my reflections on this conversation we've been having, and think it's really critical to keep pushing forward on these concepts and trying to figure out how do we optimize really how we live to come back into those planetary boundaries that were discussed and create a safe and just operating space for current generations and future generations.
Great. I think Eduard, is your turn to probably elaborate on what Mary was saying and introduce us to what regenerative development means and what can we do, each of us, to go towards that path.
Yeah, well, Mary's a lot more diplomatic than I am, I think. And I want to clarify something that I think was misunderstood. I'm not criticizing the focus on carbon. I'm not saying carbon is not important. It is really relevant, but it cannot be the only focus. Right. And that's where we're making the mistake. The reductionist science that got us into this mess in the first place will not get us out of this mess unless we transition into a more holistic approach and understanding complexity. I think Mathis' work is fundamental. I use it all the time. I did do the analysis, and the data that goes in is where we have to make it more holistic too. I mean, we have to look at cattle, but the methane is not coming. The new satellites show that the methane is not coming from where the cattle is. It's coming from the north and from the south poles, where the methane that's stored in the permafrost is being released exponentially. It's not linear. So when we talk about 2050 or 2100, I think we're just completely lost because we are not capable of thinking in exponential terms. The overshoot day, for example, is, I think, a key instrument that has brought consciousness and awareness to people. So that is based on Mathis' work. And understanding, for example, Singapore is being used by many architecture schools as a model for a city. Well, Singapore's ecological footprint is 10,000% over its biocapacity. So we build a few Singapores on the planet, and we just finish the planet very quickly. So I think it's a good system. I'm just going to go quickly into a few concepts. I cannot go much into detail because we don't have the time, but I do want to share a few ideas. So the second part about regeneration and why regeneration. Let's get, yeah. So our first challenge is it's not humans and nature. It's humans are nature. And if we don't understand that, we're not going to move forward. So we need to understand that we are within a natural system and we're part of that ecosystem. And we can blame this on Descartes having separated spirituality from material. We can blame it on Newton for having reduced a complex system to the forces exerted by its component. I mean, that's absurd in terms of nature. 1 + 1 in nature can be 20. It doesn't have to be 2. And so we need to understand that challenge. And we need to look at it holistically. So for me, regeneration is a Mother Earth that is providing life, the services for life. We're talking about ecosystem function based on biodiversity. And we're talking at functional levels in terms of landscapes, seascapes. So it's not small pilot projects that we need. We need to really shift the capacity of Mother Earth to keep on providing the systems. On the other side of the toroid is the spiritual dimension, which is fundamental. And that's where academia has failed. They put spirituality in the Department for Religion. And spirituality is deep consciousness. It's understanding our responsibilities, understanding that we're part of it. And then, of course, we have to work on the more human components of economics, society, culture, and politics. If I had time, I'd delve into that. But you can Google me up and have other posts there where I explain that a little bit more. So for me, regenerative development or regeneration is whatever is in service of life. A business, a project, a government has to be in service of life. And we're talking about all life, not only human life. And we need to depart from the reductionist view, move into the holistic approach. And why not measure it with hope? Why measure it with GDP? I mean, GDP was never correlated with development, actually. As GDP grows, inequality grows. So why are we using wrong metrics to measure development? And I think that's what we have to really start working on. So we need to understand that Mother Nature has evolved for 4 billion years. It's a huge amount of wisdom, and we're not using it. We think that bringing theory from a 4th floor of a glass building at a university is going to bring the solutions to the planet. And we just need to understand the biomimicry, understand how nature does it, and start copying from nature. And that's what regeneration is about, a lot of So one thing we need to understand, nature does not need us. We made a mistake with environmental education. We need to take care of nature. We need to protect nature. Nature takes care of itself, and it's going to get rid of us. What we should have been teaching is, if nature is not healthy, we don't exist. And that's a completely different power balance. And I think nature has warned us in all its ways possible. And it just gave us a last little help with something that put us on our knees for 2 years and say, hey, humanity, think about it. But what did we do? And you just showed the curve, how after 2017, the footprint just goes exponential. We built back better. That's the UN term, built back better. And we're actually destroying the planet a lot faster. But at the same time, what nature told us is, I'm going to show you how resilient I am. And during the 4 months vacation we gave nature in 2020 with COVID, it just bloomed all over. There wasn't a single space in the planet where nature didn't start taking over very quickly, exponentially. So it's saying, I'm still here, ready to collaborate with you. And that is the basis for all my work on regeneration. So we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to go from, I actually was very active politically and globally. And I always thought we needed a revolution. I ended up taking the R away because we need an evolution. We need to evolve as a human species. We need to go from the vertical, man on top, woman underneath, life at our feet, transition through the eco. So here's where sustainability is stuck. It's things that eco-economics, eco-societies are the way. No, we need to move on to SEVA, where humanity and all our knowledge, our technology is in service of life, in service of helping nature bring life back. Nature is the one that can do it. So who is responsible for the future? We are. We are the ones responsible for the future. It's our job to move forward. And what we need to do is know how to build the future. And that's what I've been working over the last year. So yeah, adaptation. Lots of people are working adaptation. I'm not willing to sit and learn on how to live in a collapsing planet. If we still have the possibility to build that future we want, we can build that better tomorrow. Food is causing 80% of planetary collapse, food and fiber. So it's also causing a human disaster in terms of health. That's a photo of a Miami beach in the 70s. What's missing there? We don't have all the overweight people we have today from wrong nutrition, from wrong food systems. So actually working with food, we can actually revert a lot. And the most critical thing is we've destroyed the soils of the earth. You know, we're really working on destroying this. And this has come from science. This has come from adding poison, adding fertilizers, plowing, tilling the soil, killing the mycelium. I wish I had time to go into details here, but soil is a center. And this is part of the work I'm doing for the COP in December. Starting from soil health and bringing life back to the soil with the mycelium mycorrhiza that are the fundamental building blocks of healthy soil, we can go into water, we can go into carbon sequestration, we can go into ecosystem health, we can go into planetary health, we can go into regenerative agriculture and just change our food, shift our food systems. We can go into health. And what is health? I mean, yogurt used to be something healthy. Look at a label of a yogurt in the US. I mean, it's filled with poison. How do we accept this? This is where we're missing the point. This is where we're not waking up on time. We know regenerative food is more nutrient density. We know it can revert a lot of things. My friend Zach Bush is doing some marvelous work on the microbiome and how we can actually cure autism, Alzheimer, all these diseases. Gluten intolerance is a problem of bad microbiome destroyed by glyphosate. So by working on the soil microbiome, we can go all the way up to the human microbiome and start reverting our health issues just by working on rebuilding the capacity of nature. So that's why we launched Costa Rica Regenerativa 6 years ago, and it's basically showing that we can transition to that third horizon of regeneration, moving away from a current paradigm that's not anymore fit for purpose. And this transformation is based a lot on Bucky Fuller's principle: don't fight the system, build a new one that will make the old one obsolete. We don't have time to keep on fighting the system. We just need to bring new alternatives so people shift automatically and just forget the old system. So using the donut, we started out identifying what needed to be worked on in Costa Rica to get to the ideal donut. We did this with a lot of partners. The basis is understand that agriculture is biology, not chemistry. If it were chemical, why don't we put a stamp on food that's chemical and say, eat this, this is chemical, it's really healthy, it's delicious. We're using indigenous knowledge, so that the knowledge dialogue is very important. This is Manuel Castellanos regenerating land in Chiapas. And after 9 years where I took this photo, the Western, very famous university only got a bunch of plants growing one on top of each other, whereas Manuel is able to regenerate a forest. So we need to bring this. He got 5% carbon in the soil. You can see the mycelium there, the white spots. This is how you regenerate life. And you have to work at landscape, bioregional level. It's not a 1 hectare plot demonstrating. We need to expand this to bioregions. We, during COVID, managed to get 500 families that were left without food because of the tourism was locked down. In this province where I'm living, which is based mostly on tourism, the income, we got families to produce their food regeneratively. We turned degraded soils into abundance, 10 tons per hectare without a drop of fertilizer. We turned destroyed land into paradise for insects and other wildlife, bringing populations back. We managed to turn horrible soil into carbon-rich soil and produce food in abundance. And Ratanal says we could revert climate change alone by managing soils. And Rodale Institute even says we could be fixing 150% of our global economic emissions at the planetary level just by changing the way we produce our food. And here's where regenerative cattle comes in. We are doing a plot with 30,000 hectares, identifying farms and connectivity. We work with farmers to increase, double their income. That allows us for each farmer to give 15 to 30% of his land back for biological corridors. So we're increasing production, but at the same time, we're bringing nature back at the landscape level.
Eduard,
yeah.
If you allow me, if you could wrap up, so you and Mary, who have to go
I'm finishing right now,
can hear some comments from participants.
Yeah. So biodiversity monitoring is fundamental. We need to demonstrate that we can bring life back. We have to work in all spaces, urban connectivity, biological orders at urban level, and the education has to be changed. We need to move away from the competition to the collaboration, the co-creation, and we have been developing lots of programs in this. So what we're looking for is a new relationship between humans and nature. So that's it. Sorry for taking the 3 minutes extra.
Fantastic. Because I was worried that participants may have questions for you and Mary. I think those are the most interesting reflections. And it would be nice that before you go, you have the chance to answer.
You have any comments, Mary? This is down your lane.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. I was just hoping maybe somebody else from the audience might have a question or comment, but no, regeneration is what we're thriving in and trying to move toward for sure. It is about deep structural systems changes. And I think there are many paths to try to get there. That's the other thing I think we have to remember is, depending upon where you live in the world, there might be different paths forward. There might be different, different levers of change that we have to find. But that is something that is universal. We have to change. Like we cannot keep. And right now we know that the ecological determinants of health are a significant driver for the global burden of disease. So in terms of our health and health equity, which SHEM focuses on as well, we can't get away from the fact that, as you say, we are one with nature. We are part of it. So if our environment is not stable and well, neither are we.
If there is no other comment, I'd like to react on one thing, which is if a person who is not in a university or hasn't read your articles listens to you, what will he or she do? We have to change. We know we have to change. And we know that, okay, some regenerative agriculture can help us, but how can he or she, who's not a farmer, who's not a politician, who's not a scientist, can do something about it? We have developed and updated, but it's not just yet public. For the next webinar, it will be. It's on a trials phase. There are many. An app of carbon or of footprint for life, which not only relates human and planetary health, but there is another relation which is how the way we are trespassing planetary boundaries is deeply related with economic inequity. And as there is a correlation between GDP, income, assets, you name it, with carbon emissions, you either have a lot of money or either you consume it, and global trade is translating in planetary damage, or you leave it in stocks or savings that are in fact fueling scale production, destruction, and all the global trade that goes with it. So there is a very intimate relation between changing the way Mary and Eduard are saying, and also living a more equitable and fair life in terms of our economic relations with others. So I think the individual action in our personal lives is very important, and how apps and other means can help you change many of your production, consumption, income, and trade patterns is really essential.
Interesting one. in Costa Rica Regenerativa, the only thing I'm not working on is changing habits of humans, the material footprint, because that's too complex. So by working on the main cause of planetary collapse, which is the way we produce our food and fiber, what we can do is actually gain time for other technologies to be evolved. I mean, I drive an electric car myself. Of course, it's a country that produces almost 100% of the electricity renewably, not sustainably, but renewably. So, but we do need better technology, and technology is actually helping us in the transformation process. But we need to gain time. We need to bring carbon from the atmosphere beneath our feet, and we need to do it soon. And we can do it with cattle. Zeth Itzkan, for example, from Soil for Climate, he did a big evaluation. He says we can actually be at 350 parts per million in 30 years, just by changing the current livestock to holistic grazing. And I can't go into detail, but it's a huge carbon capture system, ecologically functioning system to bring carbon from the atmosphere and put it beneath our feet. Getting rid of fertilizers. So what we need to show is farmers, they can produce a lot more, healthier, and they don't need to spend 40% of their income on buying inputs from chemical companies. So it's just showing that there's a path, and then you'll have people adopting it. It's not fighting the old system that we will be, at least I spent 40 years fighting the system, and I'm not doing it anymore.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments from participants? Andre or Diana, is there anything on the chat?
Yes, the thing on the chat. Can you please take a look?
In light of the recent UN Pact for the Future, how do you expect actions and attitudes of these public crises will change during the upcoming COP? I think this is for you, Mary, and for you, Eduard. You'll be in that COP. Is the Pact for the Future helping the way?
Look, the first time I'm going back to a COP in 6 or 7 years is now, and it's a decertification COP, which I've never been. And that's only because the deputy director asked me to set up an event on soil health. And I think it will have potential. Otherwise, I mean, for the COP10, Biodiversity COP10 in Nagoya, I traveled 302 days that year. And, you know, we're very clear, we're simple, 20 simple targets, no implementation. 10 years later, Montreal celebrated 23 new targets. So I don't believe in those systems. And there's a lot of effort being put in, the carbon footprint for people to travel to these meetings. The Biodiversity COP in Colombia, I'm getting invitation from all over. Aren't you going to the Biodiversity COP in Colombia? I don't think the change will come from there. So I don't think those, I mean, I'm not saying we should get rid of them, but I have not seen any change from Rio 92 to now that justifies me spending my effort in these processes. These agreements are not being implemented. Aichi targets 30% implementation, the ones that were implemented, the ones that were on paper. Yeah, the number of protected areas. But if you look at how these area protected areas were managed, that's not in place. So it's easy to tick off whatever is on paper, but it's difficult to tick off. So while so many people are working on that and keep on working on that, I'm concentrating on developing alternatives. And as Mary said, there are no recipes, they're principles. So we need to really look at how we can co-create solutions, because this is not in textbooks. Regeneration is not, there are a few textbooks, but many are theoretical. Applied regeneration has to be co-created together in networks. We need learning ecosystems. We need mycelium of learning systems to transform the educational system. Universities are in silos. They're going to be extinct in a few years with AI if they just keep on teaching knowledge. Kids can learn it from YouTube a lot better. So that's not the path. We need to reinvent education. We need to reinvent ourselves. A lot of people are going to be left without jobs. Medicine is being done by AI. There are already hospitals running with robots. So we need to understand that the paradigm has shifted. And if we don't wake up to create new systems and think we're just going to tweak the old systems, we're not going to move forward. There's no tweaking here. We need to reinvent our paradigm. and that's through demonstration.
Thank you, Eduard. I think those are very nice last words. Mary has left. I would just say that we will discuss in our next webinar the relations between sustainable, we need to change that name, well-being models and replicable economies. And I think there's a lot, there's a very strong relation with the capitalist system, which is based on constant growth, production, trade, consumption, which is just driving in an inertia almost everyone in consuming without thinking what's behind. So even
sorry, they're calling me from the radio interview. I have to hop off.
Okay. Bye then. Thanks so much, Eduard. Is there any question other than the ones we read in the chat, or anyone wants to say something before we call to an end? Okay, I guess, Andre, if that's the case, you may want to close and convene everyone for the next webinar.
Thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar. I feel like we're learning how to do this and becoming better every time. So we expect to see you on the next month. We are meeting at the third week of the month. This was an exception. So we're going to be receiving invitations, and I want to show that now we might have more people, that you can find the recordings and everything related to the series. You can just come to our SHEM webpage that I'm showing you right now, and you're going to come here and you can see the series, the coming webinars, and once the webinars are done, you just click and view the event and you can see the recording. So they will all be here, and we look forward to see you on the next month. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much to all of you. Bye.
Bye.
Andre, everyone. Bye for now.